Let's talk about Nana Akua, the disgrace in HD. A walking contradiction with a broadcast mic and no backbone. Let's go down the list. Her wig looks like it was left too close to the radiator. The lace isn't blending, the cut isn't current, and the texture is tired, just like her commentary. Her makeup? Caked. The kind of base you wear when you're trying to cover the shame of being this performative in public. Her voice? Grating. She speaks like someone who got their communication degree from GB News and thinks loud equals correct. She has the tone of a woman who thinks respectability is a personality. She doesn't sound smart. She sounds starved for approval. She's not a journalist. She's a stand-in, a backup dancer for other people's agenda. Her whole career has been a series of detours, radio, shopping channels, fluff segments, until she finally found a home at GB News, where credibility goes to die. She's not a host. She's a hire, a token on speed dial. She sits on that set, saying what they're too racist to say themselves, because she thinks access is the same as acceptance. It's not. She's tolerated until they don't need her anymore. She tears down black movements with the enthusiasm of someone who thinks assimilation is a political strategy. It's not. It's desperation in disguise. She mocked BLM, criticized protests, sneered at people taking the knee, as if she didn't benefit from their sacrifice. She weaponized her skin so white conservatives can point to say, "See, one of them agrees." That's not power. That's performance. She is Ghanaian by blood, but not by spirit. And frankly, that's an embarrassment. Because Ghana birthed revolutionaries. Ghana raised warriors. Ghana is a nation built on resistance and pride. And then there's Nana, tap dancing on live TV, parroting white nationalist talking points with a grin. She should be ashamed to claim that lineage. She's dishonored her ancestry for a studio check and 15 minutes on a network nobody respects. She's not a threat. She's not a leader. She's not even controversial. She's the help. And the second they're done using her voice to soften their racism, they'll send her out the side door and pretend they never knew her name. She can enjoy the light while they're still on, because they won't be for long. She is not unforgettable. She is not essential. She is a tool with an expiration date. And when it comes, not even Ghana will claim her back.
A righteous roast redemption. In the flickering glow of smartphone screens, where bites of truth and bursts of humor collide, a digital reckoning unfolded that would sear its way into the collective consciousness of TikTok's millions. NotoriousJTB, a creator whose sharp wit and unapologetic candor have carved him a throne in the platform's pantheon of truth-tellers, unleashed a verbal inferno upon Nana Akua, the GB News presenter whose polished blazers and carefully curated persona could not shield her from the flames. This was no mere roast. It was a cultural clapback, a righteous redemption that stripped bare the contradictions of a woman who, to many, had traded her heritage for a seat at a table that would never truly accept her. JTB's words, laced with the precision of a poet and the fury of a prophet, exposed the fault lines in Nana Akua's public persona, her professional choices, and her alignment with narratives that critics argue prop up white supremacy. So, the TikTok video, clocking in at just a few minutes, was honestly a masterclass in dismantling respectability politics. It was like a scathing critique of assimilation that tries to pass itself off as activism, and, a solid reminder that access to power is definitely not the same as acceptance within it. As the views soared and the comments just erupted, the internet basically bore witness to this moment where one woman's legacy was totally redefined, not by her own words, but by the unyielding mirror of a community that just refused to let betrayal go unanswered. Nana Akua Amoatama Appiah, born in 1971 to Ghanaian immigrants in Newcastle upon Tyne, England, carries a heritage rooted in a nation that's honestly synonymous with resilience and pride. Ghana, the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence from colonial rule in 1957, stands as a beacon of resistance. Its history is, really etched with the defiance of leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and the cultural richness of its Akan, Iwe, and Ga peoples. Yet, according to her critics, Nana Akua has strayed far from this legacy, choosing instead to don the mantle of a GB news presenter, a role that, some argue, makes her a mouthpiece for narratives that actually undermine the very communities her ancestors fought for. Her career, a winding path through radio stations like Kiss 100 and BBC Three Counties, and television gigs on Bid Up TV and BBC's Look East, culminated in her current perch at GB News, a network often criticised for its right-wing leanings. So, to NotoriousJTB and his followers, this whole trajectory isn't really seen as a story of triumph, but more like, a transaction, a calculated exchange of cultural capital for, just being close to power. The critique, as laid bare in JTB's viral TikTok, really hinges on this fundamental misconception that Akua is accused of embodying, basically the belief that, access to white-dominated spaces somehow equals acceptance, and that just assimilating into those spaces is some kind of activism. This, JTB argues, is a total delusion, one that Akua has, built her whole public persona on, complete with an unblended wig, caked makeup, and a voice that, honestly, just mistakes volume for wisdom. The roast starts off with a scalpel-like dissection of Akua's appearance, a surface-level critique that, honestly, just acts as a gateway to much deeper indictments. In the world of respectability politics, a term coined by Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham to describe the late 19th century efforts of black middle-class women to counter stereotypes through impeccable behavior and appearance, Akua's aesthetic choices are seen as a desperate bid for approval. But, as JTB's roast underscores, respectability is a fragile armor, one that crumbles under the weight of systemic bias. This notion of being a token is central to the critique leveled against Akua's professional role. JTB's TikTok tirade paints her not as a journalist, but as a stand-in, a seat filler, whose career detours, from hospital radio to shopping channels, reflect a lack of authenticity in her current role. So at GB News, which, has faced quite a few accusations of promoting divisive rhetoric, Akua is really seen as a convenient prop. Basically, she's a blackface articulating views that totally align with white conservative interests. These actions, JTB argues, aren't just a betrayal of the black community, but honestly, a betrayal of her own Ghanaian heritage. Ghana's history of resistance against colonial oppression really stands in stark contrast to her perceived alignment with white nationalist talking points. The roast, it frames her as a tool with an expiration date. She's painted as a figure who will eventually be discarded by the very network she serves, once her utility wanes, kind of like expired milk just left to sour. The dichotomy of access versus acceptance lies at the heart of JTB's critique. Access, as he articulates, is the ability to enter spaces of power, boardrooms, studios, or political platforms, often at the cost of one's cultural identity. Acceptance, however, is a deeper, more elusive state, one that implies genuine belonging and respect within those spaces. Akua, critics argue, has mistaken the former for the latter, believing that her presence at GB News signifies a seat at the table when in reality she is merely a guest tolerated for her utility. Similarly, the critique of assimilation versus activism strikes at her claim to be a freethinker. JTB's roast dismisses this label as a facade, accusing her of regurgitating anti-black rhetoric for a paycheck, rather than challenging the systems of oppression that BLM and other movements seek to dismantle.